All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio. Next up, it's our friend Ray McGovern. He's a former CIA analyst for 27 years. Now he's a veteran intelligence professional for Sanity. He writes for Robert Perry's site, consortiumnews.com. He will give a speech to your community if you invite him. And he's written this piece that we're running at antiwar.com called Applying the 6-Day War to Iran. Welcome back to the show, Ray. How's it going?
Thanks. Doing well.
Good. All right. So, you know what? I don't know anything about the 6-Day War. Why don't you teach me all about it? The 67 War. When people say the 67 borders in Israel and the dispute with Palestine, they mean the borders as they were before this war.
That's right. Yeah. In May of 1967, Israel was making a case that it was under dire threat from Egyptian formations and from others that surrounded Israel. And the myth was propagated that Israel needed to protect itself. In the event, on the 5th of June, the Israeli armed forces launched an incredible attack, a blitzkrieg, really, on Syrian and Egyptian forces, and those in Jordan as well, and decimated their aircraft, and actually invaded Egypt, the Sinai, and took over Gaza, went up onto the place that used to be governed by Jordan, the West Bank, took that, went up into parts of Syria called the Golan Heights, and took parts of Jerusalem as well. Now, those became the, quote, those enlarged the borders that existed before 1967 by several times.
Yeah, but whatever happened to every time Israel ever fought, it was because those dastardly Arabs surprise attacked them and they had to defend themselves, and so tough luck if they lost their West Bank. They shouldn't have started a war then.
Yeah, that's what pro-Zionist folks say now, but, you know, it's sort of embarrassing because Prime Minister Menachem Begin, in a fit of, maybe it was hubris, maybe it was inadvertence, but he said in a major speech in 1982, quote, "In June 1967, we had a choice. The Egyptian army concentrations in the Sinai did not prove that Nasser was really about to attack us. We must be honest with ourselves. We decided to attack him, period," end quote. That's the truth of the matter. What the Israelis wanted to do was enlarge their borders. Back in my day, when World War II broke out, the term was Lebensraum, okay? More room for the Germans to live in. And so they've actually held on to these occupied territories from 1967 until today, and if my arithmetic is correct, next week they will be celebrating the 45th anniversary of the occupation. That's what it is, an occupation. And that's a couple of years longer.
Well, now, let me ask you this real quick about the narrative here, because this is before my time, right? I'm born in the 70s kind of guy. So, I wonder if this is one of those things where if you were around then, and I know, okay, you were CIA or whatever, but even, say, a critical thinker out in the world back then, they really knew the truth of this, and it was just, you know, for the rubes, the idea that Israel was attacked and was defending themselves. You know, I'm thinking, I'm trying to think of a parallel where, like, say, the Waco massacre, where if you were a damn fool, then you believed that it was a suicide. But for anyone who knew better, come on, it was not a mass fire suicide. Give me a break, you know? That kind of thing. Was it like that where now it's sort of funny to look back and see that the lie was successful after all these years still?
Well, as you know, the media in our country and in Western Europe is not unbiased. The truth, even though it came out when the Prime Minister of Israel in 1982 admitted what had happened.
Yeah, but what about in 67? I mean, was it obvious what had really happened in 67?
Not all that obvious, no, because unless you were really well read into what was going on, you could have believed that these Egyptian formations did endanger Israel, because there were some formations in the Sinai. The reason that it didn't really matter is because the Israelis had been preparing for years to do precisely this kind of strike, and it was very convenient to have the Egyptians do this foolish thing and marching some soldiers up to their borders.
Right. So in other words, when Begin said this in '82, that was the first real chip in the wall of the narrative there.
That's an authoritative statement by the Israelis themselves. And when you have that, you don't have to be an intelligence analyst to recognize that you've got a gem. I mean, there are all kinds of parallels of people saying things that they slip, or they're so proud that they forget that what they're actually revealing. And this is one of them. This is one of the classic ones, and it's never been, disavowed by Menachem Begin or anybody else.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, so then the consequences of this is. They, of course, moved a bunch of settlers in, and they've had military occupations and the steady encroachment, the expansion of the facts on the ground, as you say in your article, this whole time. What was it, 45 years they've been under occupation? And I guess they only just pulled the settlers out of Gaza in 2005, but it's still, as you say in your article, just an open-air prison. This is severe, lasting consequences from this war here for everyone.
Yeah, for those who remember that the Soviet Union occupied Eastern Europe, well, the Israelis are occupying the Arab lands much longer, a couple of years already longer than the Soviets occupied Eastern Europe. So this is against all international law. It's against the UN Security Council Resolution 242 of November 1967, which the United States voted for, okay? In other words, voted for condemning Israel and asking it to revert to its pre-1967 borders. Now, there's been a lot of water under the dam since then, and the Israelis have been able to, as you say, create facts on the ground. You said groups or dozens or whatever of settlers. Well, there are hundreds of thousands of settlers now on the choice real estate in the West Bank, and even up in the Golan and in East Jerusalem. So what Netanyahu and some of his predecessors were out to do was to make it historically impossible for the Palestinians to come back to their native lands. And now, even though a lot of verbiage is given to the advisability of a two-state solution, in my view, that's no longer possible. How can you have a two-state solution when the one state would really amount to a Bantustan, where you'd have little pockets of Palestinians surrounded by the Israeli settlers? So the bottom line for me is, there's a choice between a democratic country there, where everyone is given a voice, and a racist country, where only Jews are given a voice. And I think that history shows that no matter how firm and how strong the security forces are, as in South Africa, there comes a time when this kind of regime cannot any longer rule, and majority rule does take place. It's just a matter of time, in my view, and if Israel embarks on new adventures, I think it will hasten the arrival of that time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talked with Neve Gordon last week on the show about how, Israeli kind of denial of the original Nakba atrocity, along with this kind of thing too, where, Israeli society, I guess, goes along with the old myths of this war along with the rest of them. And so, that then leads to the consequences of, like you're talking about, where they just continue on occupying the West Bank. And as he put it, most Israelis just don't even pay attention to it at all. If they have to think about it, they have all these default myths to rest on that, hey, we're attacked and that's what happens. You lose some territory if you pick a fight with us, or, that kind of thing. And then they can just dismiss it and go on about their day. So it's these foundational myths, same as here in America, that, allow for the atrocities to continue. And I'm sorry we got to take this break. We'll be right back with Ray McGovern. Yeah, it's Anti-War Radio. I'm Scott. I'm online with our friend Ray McGovern from consortiumnews.com and raymcgovern.com. And we're talking about the 6-day war and how the kind of fake accounting of it is the basis for a continued bad policy over there in the Middle East. And then I was bringing up what Neve Gordon said about the original Nakba back in 48, how it just gets ignored, and the state, of course, has an official policy of playing it down. And so it's one of those things, out of sight, out of mind kind of a deal.
The danger here is that they're trying to apply this glorious victory and the experience they had during those 6 days in June of 67 to the, quote, imminent danger, end quote, they face from Iran now, and that a blitzkrieg of that moment should be arranged and fought. Right. And draw us in. Now that's Charles Krauthammer and others who are pushing that line. And the good news, and this just broke this morning, I'm not even sure you had a chance to see it, but the good news is that our man in the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Amano, a Japanese diplomat, who we pretty much put in there and are paying extra for doing our bidding, he went to Iran. He went to Tehran just over the weekend, came back today and said, looks like a deal is very close. We had good, positive discussions there in Iran, and the Iranians are saying the same thing. So it looks very much as though the United States has been able to lean on Amano to come off his high horse about so-called violations. It looks like the Iranians have been able to bend so far that Amano can satisfy himself that he's able to mount very intrusive inspections, and so it does look like the negotiations, which begin tomorrow in Baghdad of all places, are likely to achieve some success, unless. Now we have the U.S. and virtually everyone else thinking that we don't want a war against Iran, but there's one very powerful actor, and unfortunately that actor has the initiative. His name is Bibi Netanyahu. And if you look at things from Bibi's perspective, he's really eager for a victory here. Israel's had a very bad hair year, so to speak. They lost Turkey to the north. They lost Egypt to the south. Egypt has 80 million people to Israel's 6 or 7 million. And worst of all, from their point of view, the contenders for the presidency in Egypt are talking about renegotiating the peace treaty with Israel and flinging open the borders to Gaza. So they are in a very delicate diplomatic position. They've lost more. They're at more peril strategically than ever before. And I can see that Netanyahu might see some incentive here to prove that it doesn't really matter, because he's got the U.S., this sole remaining superpower in the world, walking in, the president's word, lockstep with Israel. And so how better to do that than to start a dust-up with Iran, force Obama to face the inevitable choice of jumping in with both feet, especially in an election year. And whatever happens, happens, but Netanyahu has caused it to happen, and he's drawn the U.S. in for the whole world to see that the U.S. is still 110% in favor of Israel, no matter what it does. And so I see that as a very palpable incentive to Netanyahu, the way he thinks. I hope this won't happen, but don't rule it out, because these negotiations are viewed in a very, very distrustful way by Netanyahu, because when push comes to shove, the Israeli leaders are not worried about a nuclear weapon in Iran's hands. They want regime change there. And they got regime change in Baghdad, and what a mess that is. They can't get regime change in Cairo or in Ankara the way we want it. Let's try Iran. And it seems to be sort of a last gasp sort of thing. I hope it doesn't happen, but Obama is not out of the woods, even if he gets the IAEA to turn around and say, okay, we can work out a deal with these Iranians.
Well, do you believe that, or how certain are you, I guess, that Obama actually wants to make a deal this week? I mean, this is the P5+1. This is the entire permanent membership of the UN Security Council plus Germany, supposedly laying it all on the line, right, to try to make a deal. But is it just so that they have an excuse, so that they can say, look, we tried everything? Because that's been the game this whole time, pretty much. I mean, you'd have to be making the case to me that they've changed the plan to, we really do want to make a deal and put an end to all of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, Obama doesn't want an Israeli attack on Iran. That's one of the main reasons for the sanctions, to buy off the Israelis. Say, look, we're going to hurt them real bad. Just wait, okay? Now, the sanctions are a problem, and they're a problem for the Iranians, to be sure. The Iranians want those things to stop. If, as I suspect, and my intelligence colleagues agree, Iran has absolutely nothing to hide, I think the case is pretty clear that they will invite intrusive inspections into Parcham and elsewhere to show even doubting Thomases like the head of the IAEA, hey, there is no weaponry being worked on here. So the U.S. intelligence, the U.S. Defense Secretary, and Israeli counterparts are right in saying, and I repeat, Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon. Now, those are the facts. Now, what about the lies? The lies are equally important. What Netanyahu said 2 days ago is this: Iran is out to destroy Israel, a variation on that wipe them off the map theme. That's wrong. That's a lie. And Iran is working on a nuclear weapon with which to destroy Israel. Again, I don't know if he's lying or not, but that's not what U.S. intelligence and Israeli intelligence say, okay? Now, if you accept those two premises, that Iran is going to use a nuclear weapon to destroy Israel, well, the rest of what Netanyahu says makes sense. Namely, they have to destroy their new nuclear development site there in Parcham. They have to ship out the rest of their low-enriched uranium, and they have to stop working at all on nuclear on uranium enrichment, even the kind that could be used for power reactors. So those are his three demands. Those three demands are never going to be met, and they're all based on two premises that are outright lies, and even his defense minister says, and I repeat, Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon. We have the UN inspectors there, said the Israeli defense minister. If they are thrown out, then come back to me, he says to a questioner on Armed Forces Radio. Then come back to me and ask how soon the Iranians can get a nuclear weapon. But until then, relax. It doesn't matter. As long as the UN inspectors are there, they're not working on a nuclear weapon. That's the Israeli defense minister on the 16th of January of this year.
All right, but let's get back to Krauthammer real quick and the neocons, because they're, setting up to be able to say, we told you so, and now we have to have a war, that kind of thing, I guess. And based on the myth of the 67 war here, Krauthammer is arguing in the Post that it'll be great. We can launch this war, and we'll just bomb all their nuclear facilities real good, and their military and whatever, we'll declare victory and, do this kind of thing, wiping the dirt off our hands when we're done, and it'll be great.
Yeah, that's true, Scott. And my point is simply this, that in answer to your earlier question, Obama does not want an Israeli attack on Iran. He's been unable or unwilling to say openly, look, Bibi Netanyahu, you strike out at Iran or you provoke an attack from Iran, and we're out of it. You're on your own. Now, I think he said close to that in private. But the fact that he's unwilling to say that in public speaks volumes to people like Netanyahu, and I can see him conferring with his associates and saying, look, what did I tell you? Obama's not even able to say publicly that he doesn't want us to attack Iran. If we do, he's in with both feet. Watch me. That's what makes it so dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I dare say I would have to agree with Netanyahu's diagnosis of Obama, unless he gets a spinal transplant or an implant, I guess, implanting a spine in his back, because anytime Netanyahu, sneezes, Obama reaches for the nearest handkerchief.
Well, Yeah, that's one way to put it. And of course now Netanyahu is in such a stronger position politically in Israel. I don't know if that really makes war that much more likely or less. I mean, I guess from a certain point of view, maybe all of this warmongering has just been a way for him to solidify all his power, but he doesn't really mean it. And maybe it's already worked.
Yeah, one side effect, of course, is takes attention away from the Palestinian issue, and that's very much to their benefit, the Israelis.
Yep. Of course. All right, well, we got to leave it there. Thanks very much. Ray McGovern, everybody. RayMcGovern.com. Thanks.
Most welcome.